Hey, what's going on, Giants fans? Daryl Slater here with Bob Brookover. The latest episode of your Talk is Cheap Giants podcast coming to you on Monday after the Giants bye week. It hasn't been that long since we last talked to you guys on Wednesday coming out of the trade deadline, but figured we'd do a quick podcast here as the Giants at 6-2 look ahead to their final 9 regular season games starting Sunday against the Houston Texans at home. And so, we'll just a few things to cover here. Bob, how you doing?
Hey, Daryl. I'm ready to get back to working, ready to get back to covering some football.
Yeah, it was nice to have a couple days off. Nice weather weekend here, really up and down the East Coast, and certainly in the Northeast. And so, hope everyone had a nice weekend. But we talked about some of this stuff last week. We'll go ahead and just set the stage here. Obviously, this game doesn't have a ton of intrigue. As you wrote last week, the Giants need to win this game, and they need to beat the Lions if they're indeed going to be a playoff team. But just putting some numbers on it right now, the Giants have an 85.5% chance of making the playoffs at 6-2, according to ESPN, but just a 1.3% chance of winning the division. Obviously, with the Eagles at 8-0 atop the division there. And so that's where the Giants are here. Very good chance of getting one of those 3 wild card spots. And certainly the season could swing one way or the other here in these next couple weeks if the Giants are able to take care of business, or if they're not, against the Texans and the Lions. And so that's where the Giants stand. And leading into the Thanksgiving showdown with Dallas, which has to go to Green Bay next week, this coming week, and then go to Minnesota. So a tough game there for the Cowboys going to Minnesota right before they have to play the Giants at home on Thanksgiving. What do you make of where things stand with the Giants here coming out of the bye, as they are still the 5th seed in the NFC? Sixth
Yeah,
seed. Sixth seed.
in a lot of ways, I put these two games as must-win games. The Houston game, they have to beat them. Um, you know, Houston's not a great team, but I sat and watched the NFL last week, which we never get to do because we're always covering a game. And you're looking at the screen, and it doesn't matter who's playing who for the most part. At one point, I was watching 3 different games with 3 minutes left, and they're all 17-17. You know, at different levels of teams. You know, you look at this. The Dolphins beat the Bears 35-32. 20-17, the Chiefs over the Titans, which that Titans win for the Giants is looking better and better all the time, even though the Titans lost yesterday. 27-20 Jags. The Jags over the Raiders. The Jets beat the Bills 20-17, and nobody saw that coming. Just all these games are so tight, so you can't. If you're the Giants, the point is that if you're the Giants, you can't go into a game thinking, hey, we have this game won just because you're playing the Houston Texans and the Detroit Lions. And the Lions won yesterday against the Packers team that hasn't won since before London. And I'm sure Brian Dable is driving that point home. And if he really wants to make the point, he can turn on the film of the Texans Eagles game and show them, hey, this game is 14-14 at halftime. And the Texans weren't really out of it till late in the game, entirely out of it. So, you know, they're must-win games for the Giants coming out of this, and if they win these 2 games, it's an 85% chance right now. I'm not good at math, and so I don't know what the chances will rise to. But you have to think a team that's 8-2 with 7 games remaining has a pretty good chance of making the playoffs.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And as things stand right now, the NFC looks like this with the top 4 seeds: the Eagles, the Vikings, Seattle, and then Tampa. Of course, the division leaders there. And then the Cowboys, the first wild card team, at 6-2. The Giants, they're at 6-2 in the number 6 slot. Then the Niners at 4-4. And other than that, there's not a single team in the NFC that has either a 500 or winning record. The 8 and 9 seeds right now are Atlanta and Washington at 4-5 each. So, obviously the Giants are 3 up in the loss column out of that 8th seed, and they're 2 up in the loss column from the 7th seed. So they're in great position here, obviously, and certainly if they're an 8-2 team, even though they do have some challenges, that 8-2, you got to figure there's a ton of wiggle room there. Even though they do still after that have to play the Eagles twice, they'd have to play the Cowboys once down the stretch, among some other games that could be challenging. Obviously, the trip to Minnesota will be a challenge, and we'll see about the Colts and Washington. But yeah, I think that this sets up nicely for them coming out of the bye week. Certainly, even though, like you said, and that's why the gambling on the NFL is absolutely insane, as we were talking about before this. So unpredictable and just crazy. So again, I say bank on things at your own risk, but I don't see how the things could not be setting up any better for the Giants here. Extra rest. Yes, the Texans have a little bit extra rest than they would have if they played Sunday. But speaking of the rest, let's set the stage a little bit here this week for the injury front. Who are you looking at in terms of guys we're going to be keeping an eye on this week for the Giants perhaps getting some players back from injury?
You know, he's on the IR, but I think a guy, well, both of them, O'Shane's Zimenez is not on the IR, and he's a guy they could just use help rushing the passer. And O'Shane's one of them that I think they'd like to get back, but even bigger, he's on IR is the Cesar Ojulari. I think they could really use some help and some depth at those positions. Uh, they've gotten some contributions from guys who they didn't expect, including we talked a lot about rookies, but Tomon Fox has made contributions here and there. But I think you want your big guys back for pressure. Should you need to really start getting some pressure. One of the things that Giants really need to do better in the second half is get takeaways via the interception. They have one all season. And interceptions so often come from pressure, and the one they have came from pressure, which was created by a bad handling of the snap by Lamar Jackson. But I just think pass rush is so important for this team, and to get some guys back, some of those healthy bodies back, would really help them a lot.
Yeah, no doubt, and certainly Kenny Galladay topping a list of the most notable Giants players. And you mentioned trying to shore up that pass rush. O'Shane Ximines obviously can come back from his quad injury because he's not on IR. Azeez Ojulari still has to miss 2 more games here with his calf injury, just because of the parameters of IR. You got to miss four games. So that's where they stand with that. Ximines has now missed 2 games, and he's had the bye week to heal up. And of course, Galladay has not played since the Bears game. My goodness, I mean, it's been quite a while ago. I was October the 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
he's only
been
played 2 games all year, so
yeah, October the 2nd. Kenny Galladay is, and look, Kenny Galladay is not going to be with the Giants.
okay. You talking about Galladay? I thought you were talking about Zimenez. I mean, Ojulari.
Yeah, Ojulari,
He's
two
only
separate
played two
calf
games all
injury.
year.
Very disappointing season for him. Still has to miss 2 more games because of the IR rules. But Kenny Galladay, unlike Ojulari, Kenny Galladay was awful last year. He's been awful and unreliable this year. He's going to be gone after this season. We all know that, but that doesn't mean he can't help this team down the stretch. There's nothing that says he
Right.
can't
And
do a little something.
as we talked about last week, he's on record as saying, "Hey, I want to play for a good team for the first time in my life." Well, here's your chance. He's playing for his next contract. You know, so if he could perform well for a good team for the last 9 weeks of the season, it's certainly not going to hurt his market.
For sure. And another guy to watch, of course, Evan Neal. I don't think Evan Neal comes back from the knee injury this week. Remember, the Giants put Ben Bredesen on IR. They did not put Evan Neal on IR. So they're hopeful that Evan Neal will miss fewer than 4 games. But I don't think it'll be this week for Evan Neal, who's dealing with a knee injury that he suffered in Jacksonville. Obviously, a really important player, even though he's had a bit of a roller coaster season for this team. And so, you did some picks over the weekend for the rest of the games. I guess we can go through them real quick in terms of game by game here. We could just do win loss. 9 games left. Let's start with the Texans game. How do you see it going? Just real quick win loss there for the Giants.
I definitely see them beating the Texans. You have to think they have to win the game. So and they're rested, like as you said before, they're well rested. Yeah, the Texans have a little bit of an extra rest too, but if you're a playoff team, you win this game, and I think I think it could be a tougher game than we think, but I think they do end up winning because they as I talked before, the Texans played the Eagles pretty tough, and they did that without their top 2 wide receivers, Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, who I'm not sure Collins is going to be back, but I'm pretty sure Cooks is going to be back for this game. So, and then the one thing that the Texans do have is a terrific rookie back in Dameon Pierce. He's the guy to watch out for this week. He ran all over the Eagles in that game. So the Giants have faced their fair share of difficult running backs this year, and they've got another one this week, but they should win that game.
And the Giants have had some difficulty stopping the run. 26 right now in Pro Football Focus's run defense ratings, and so that'll certainly be something to watch. I have the Giants winning this game as well. Yeah, I mean the Texans rebuilding post Deshaun Watson. The Giants win the game here. What the Detroit game at home? How do you see it? We don't have to get into the weeds of it. A win or loss there for the Giants.
Well, I had them losing it in my original lousy picks when I had the
Wow.
Giants winning 5 games, and now I have them winning it 24-20.
I think I had them winning this all along, so I'll stick with that. So we're both in agreement here that the Giants will be 8-2 going to Dallas Thanksgiving. The Cowboys, of course, beat the Giants in Week 3 at MetLife Stadium. Will the Giants get revenge there in Dallas?
I don't think so. I mean, let's remember they lost that game with Cooper Rush at quarterback, and now they're going to be facing Dak Prescott and the Cowboys defense. It keeps has a lot of confidence right now and believes it's really really good, and I think it is very good, led by Micah Parsons. I don't see the Giants going there on Thanksgiving and winning.
Yeah, I'll agree with you again and be unoriginal. So that I have the Giants losing that game as well. And then the really interesting one here, Washington has played, um, well in spots this year. The Giants host them on December the 4th. That's the post Thanksgiving game. A little bit of extra rest, of course, for the Giants because Thanksgiving being on Thursday. I feel like the Giants should probably. That's a game you should probably win if you're a playoff team.
You should. I mean, the 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 Washington gave Minnesota all could handle yesterday. Before the Vikings pulled it out, which every Vikings game, the Vikings and Giants are almost mirror teams in terms of every one of their games is decided by less than one score, and this was another one for the Vikings. The one thing to look for in that game, and so what are we about? We're 4 weeks out from that, roughly. Is that Chase Young could be back for
Yeah.
the Commanders, and that gives their defense is already pretty good, and that's another dynamic. I don't know if he's Micah Parsons, but he might be the closest thing to Micah Parsons in the NFL. Provided he's healthy, he's going to be out for a long time, so it might take him some time to get his sea legs, but that's just an X factor in that game. But I still have the original question. I still have the Giants winning that game.
I will as well. That puts the Giants at 9-3, heading into a game against the Eagles, who almost certainly will be better than 9-3 on December the 11th at MetLife Stadium. Can the Giants upset the Eagles, or should I say, will they upset the Eagles?
Well, I picked my original pick, as I pointed out in the story I wrote on the post I put up, was for the Giants to win 26-24. Basically, they beat the Eagles last year. I didn't think the Eagles would be as good as they are when the season started, and I didn't think the Giants would be as good as they were either. But picked the Giants to win 26-24, and my new pick is for the Giants to win 26-24.
Wow. Okay.
But part of that is I'm hoping the Eagles come in like 12-0 because it brought back a memory from when I was young and like in my maybe early 20s, very early 20s, maybe like 21 years, whatever it was. And the Giants came to Veterans Stadium as a 10-0 team. And the Eagles beat them pretty good. It was close for a long time, but then the Eagles scored a lot late and beat them. And Eagles fans started chanting 10-1, 10-1. And I thought one of the best comebacks ever. And at that time, you would get a lot of Giants fans would come into Veterans Stadium, and it could get very ugly. And the Giants fans' counter was 10-1, 10-1, because at the time the Eagles had improved to like 7-4. So the Giants fans said, "Yeah, oh yeah, we're 10-1. That's pretty good." But anyway, the PS to the story is the Giants went on to win the Super Bowl, and Buddy Ryan's Eagles, who never won a playoff game, lost in the first round of the playoffs. So
Oof.
so I got the Giants winning this game.
In honor of buddy with great buddy Ryan there, and I'll have the Eagles winning. So that puts the Giants in my book here at 9-4. You have them at 10-3. Going into what should be a really interesting trip to Washington, the first of two straight road games uh, on December the 18th. At that point, you'd think Chase Young would be back for sure, and perhaps as you mentioned, have his sea legs under him. Giants win that game in Washington or lose it.
I think the Giants win because I think
Wow. All right.
here's what I think is going to happen. Um, I, I think the Commanders are dealing with so much. It's their team being sold. Now you lose a close game yesterday to Vikings. Maybe things go different if that doesn't happen. But now you lose that close game. Next up for them is the Eagles on the road. Who the Eagles have already beaten them. So now you go to 4-6, and now you're dealing with the sale of the team and all that outside noise when a team's losing can come into play. Uh, I'm not sure if or when Carson Wentz is going to be back. I haven't really looked into that much, but you could have that noise too. And I think it could all fall apart for the Commanders by week 15 of the season, which for us, I'm thinking is going to end up being on a Saturday instead of a Sunday. I don't know. Um, I think they might flex that game to the Saturday and make it a night game, but that's another topic altogether. But I
Yeah.
have the Giants. I have the Giants winning that one.
Okay, so that's 11-3. I'll pick the Giants to lose, so I have them now at 9-5, and that's a good point to bring up. The flex games there, it's either going to be December the 17th, a Saturday, or December the 18th, a Sunday, for that Washington game. So if any of you folks are thinking about going down there, keep an eye out for that. Because they flex that game, and also they have the ability to flex it. The season finale at the Eagles is either going to be on the 7th of January or the 8th of January, a Saturday or a Sunday there. So those are the two games that obviously if you're living in New
I mean, I
Jersey.
guess they can flex it too to like they can make it the night game too. I guess I don't know exactly how that works
Yes.
these days.
Yeah, I guess they have the ability to have it
They
at
make
any
it the
time.
Sunday night game.
Sure. And
Um,
so if you're coming from New Jersey, it's not quite as much. You're not getting a flight, but for your purposes of traveling down there. So I have the Giants now. You have through 14 games, 11-3. I
eleven
have
and three.
9-5. Do you think so? Christmas Eve, we know that game is definitely going to be Christmas Eve in the afternoon at 1 o'clock. Will the Giants win in Minnesota? Which
I do not think they'll win in Minnesota. Although
yeah,
they have a great if the Vikings stick to form and the Giants stick to form, it's going to be a really tight game. But I just think the Vikings at home have, they have Dalvin Cook, who's not as good as Saquon, but he's a heck of a back, and Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins is playing very, very well. I can't see the Giants winning that game.
the Vikings have been fantastic this year. Kirk Cousins, new life under Kevin O'Connell, and so I have them losing the Giants that game. So that'll be the third straight loss in my book here for the Giants. They dropped to 9-6. I have them. You have them 11-4 coming out of the trip to Minnesota on Christmas Eve. That puts them at home with 2 games left in the regular season here. At home against the Colts on New Year's Day. That's an interesting one because the Colts are
I mean,
obviously
after watching the Colts yesterday, they're a mess.
yeah, they're starting
And
over with Sam Ellinger.
yeah,
I don't
right.
see. I mean, the Giants cannot lose that game.
They shouldn't. I mean, if they do, they probably don't deserve to be in the playoffs. If they're the 9-6 team you have them being, rather than the 11-4 team I have them being, um, a loss there could really cost them a chance to
Sure,
get into the playoffs.
absolutely. I also have them winning that game. So you have them at 12-4. I have them at 10-6, and even under the new playoff parameters with 3 wild card teams, it looks like 10 wins is enough to get you in the playoffs. And so I'm sure at 12-4, the Giants probably will have clinched by that point. At 10-6, it would be all but certain heading into the season finale in Philadelphia. And like we've mentioned a couple times, you mentioned on here, um, will the Eagles be motivated to play their starters in that game? Certainly if
Well,
they're undefeated, they're going to go for the undefeated record. But we got a long way to go before 17-0.
But I have another take on this thing too.
Yeah.
Uh, is that the Cowboys are playing very, very well, and if the Cowboys stay on the Eagles' heels, if the Cowboys win the rematch with the Eagles and the Eagles stumble somewhere, both teams will have two losses, could go into that final week with two losses. Uh, and the Giants at 12-4 could have a playoff berth clinched. The Giants could essentially use that as their bye week ahead of a playoff game, with the Eagles needing the game to be the number one seed and having home field advantage through the playoffs. It's possible it could play out that way, where the Giants rest their starters and the Eagles say, we're going for this game to get the number one seed. That's entirely conceivable.
Yeah, and remember too, there's only one seed that gets a bye, right, in the current playoff format,
Right,
and so
right,
uh,
right. So they did play for that bye.
it's
It would
really important.
for the Eagles. It would work in a couple ways because you probably don't want to have 2 weeks. I can't think that NFL coaches like the idea of giving their players 2 weeks off before a playoff game. So you would play your team. For the Giants, it works too. You could rest your guys for a week before you go have to play. Get healthy before you have to go play a playoff game. Um, and who cares if you lose the game?
Yeah,
It's an interesting scenario, but as you point out, we're a long way from week 17.
yeah. The new seeding makes it really interesting. Only one team getting a bye in terms of the motivation for the last week. So odds are, I mean, the Giants will be playing on the first weekend in the playoffs, and so then it just becomes like, how much do they care about their seating? And obviously, if you're playing for a home game versus not a home game, then that matters. But remember too, it's interesting. Last year, Green Bay was the one seed and got the bye. They lost to San Francisco at home in that divisional round, and then Tennessee got the bye and lost to Cincinnati at home. So both one seeds lost last year. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again, of course. But so in terms of that last game here, that final game in week 18. So you think the Giants beat the Eagles or they lose? I mean, there's so many factors here, but how do you see it right now?
Yeah, well, under the scenario that I created, where the Giants rest their starters and the
Yeah.
Eagles play for the number one seed, the Eagles win that game easily.
Yep. And so that you got Giants at 12-5. It's just so many what ifs, but I think the Giants will lose that game. And so I have them at 10-7. You have them at 12-5, and that gets them into the playoffs. But I think probably at 12-5 they could host. I don't know if they would.
You can't host though if you're not a division winner, can you? I don't
Okay.
think.
Okay, you know what? You might, I should actually have a better handle on that. Let me look at how the playoffs went last year. In the
Yeah.
NFC, the Packers
No,
won,
you can't.
obviously.
You can't host
Yeah.
unless you're a winner. They would
Yep.
like under the
Great
current
point.
format. They would be playing probably. They'd play the Bucks probably as the Bucks would be the 4th seed and they'd be the 5 at 12-5.
Yep, that's my bad. Yeah, because so that each of the
Or
divisions.
you know what? That's not that. They'd be the 6th seed, so they'd be playing the 3 seed, which would be Seattle. They'd be going back to Seattle because either the Eagles or Cowboys would end up as the 5 seed.
Yep. And so right now, as it shakes out, I believe that's exactly how it would go. Let me just look at the standings here again. As we said, the Giants being the 6th seed right now, and yeah, that means if you're the 6, then you're going to play the 3. The 2 plays a 7, the 6 plays a 3, and the 4 and the 5 play each other. And that would, yes, you're right. Right now, it would mean a trip to Seattle for a rematch of that game, because the 4 spot's either going to be Atlanta or Tampa, a really bad NFC South team. So that kind of 4 spot is sort of locked in. The Giants probably would love to play that team rather than have to go out to Seattle, right? And wouldn't you think, go to Atlanta or Tampa, take your chances against that team? So the Giants obviously are going to try to win as many games as they can, but
Right, but
there's a
but having the Eagles and Cowboys in their same division is going to make
yep,
that very rough to get up to that 5 seed.
there's a distinct difference certainly between the fifth wild card, the 5 seed, and the 6 seed, because you're playing, as things shake out right now, either a trip to Seattle or a fairly winnable game against the NFC South winner, and staying on the East Coast with Tampa obviously and Atlanta there. So, but I think we both agree that the Giants will not collapse and that they will make the playoffs. But before we go, I wanted to also, this is a kind of an odd pivot, but we've kind of covered everything going forward for this season coming out of the bye. You had a really interesting piece today about Daniel Jones looking forward. And now we've talked so much about week in, week out stuff here, but the big picture is still important, as we were reminded when Joe Shane spoke to reporters last week. That's his deal. He's the big picture guy, and there's still a lot of big picture things to address here, including what do they do with Daniel Jones. And so that's an interesting post you had today. If everyone, be sure to check it out on on NJ.com/Giants. Who else could be interested in Daniel Jones? If the Giants decide to franchise tag him, that's how they could retain him. But if they do something different, or if they decide to let him walk, where could he end up? You just give folks a quick rundown of what you came
Yeah,
up with.
the transition tag I think would make things interesting in terms of does any team see him as a long term solution to quarterback? It would be a gamble, but one of the things I pointed out in the article is that teams do, especially teams that feel like, hey, we're not that far away. We have a lot of talent in other areas. We're going to try to look for a veteran quarterback rather than have to, when you draft one of these young guys, I don't care who they are. It took Josh Allen a year to really get going, to become what he became. So teams like looked for, two teams now have gone and looked at Carson Wentz to see if he could be their solution. The Colts have done it 3 years in a row. They did it with Philip Rivers, and it worked out pretty well. And then he retired, and then they tried Carson Wentz, and then this year they tried Matt Ryan. Not working out so well. So it happens. Is the point? And then the Falcons replaced Matt Ryan with Marcus Mariota, who hadn't had a job in 2 years, and that's working out pretty well for them. I mean, they're tied for first place in a weak AFC South, but he's played pretty well for them. And Daniel Jones is, one of the things that I didn't even really understand is my first year on the beat how young Daniel Jones is. He's only 25 years old, and he's not 26 for a while. He came into this league really, really young for a quarterback, and was thrown into the fire pretty young. So I mean, he's a guy who's got some established skills that you can only get by playing the game. Some of the teams I looked at, and I think Carolina is probably, they're another team that has really gone, and they've tried Baker Mayfield, they've tried Sam Darnold, thinking they're close. So I've got to think they're going to be bad enough to get one of the big three. Bryce Young, Will Levis, or C.J. Stroud are going to be the three guys coveted out of this draft. And given the fact, I figured this out, they've used 8 different quarterbacks since 2018, which was really the end, although they did bring him back for Cam Newton. And they're 24-50 since 2018, using 8 different starting quarterbacks. And Jones is a North Carolina native, so maybe I'm sure that interests him going back there. But I see it as being doubtful. I think the Texans are another team that he'd certainly be a big upgrade for, but they're going to be another team that goes the draft. I don't know. Indy's not going to draft high enough to get one of those 3 guys probably. So, if their Sam Ellinger doesn't work out, they're a team that could. It would be hard to comprehend that they'd do it 4 straight years and look at a different guy. But certainly Daniel Jones would be an upgrade, and if they still think they're a good team, worthwhile. But the team that interests me most, I think, because as I pointed out, they're a pretty good defensive team already. But Carson Wentz isn't working out for them. I think Washington would be an interesting landing spot for Daniel Jones, because I just think he's got skills, and if you have a really good defense, he's the type of guy, as we're seeing with the Giants. You're playing a close game. He's proving that he can make those plays in the fourth quarter. Joe Shane said it himself. The big third downs, the big plays, and the big moments in the game. He's been really impressed by what he's seen from Daniel Jones. Well, obviously, some other teams are going to be impressed by that too. And the other thing that I'm sure Joe Shane and Brian Dable are taking into consideration, and so will other teams, is that he's dealing with the worst wide receiver core, probably the worst, certainly one of the worst wide receiving cores in the NFL. So, if you're an Italian talent evaluator for another team, you're bringing that into consideration too when you're thinking about it. So, and the other thing to consider is, Tom Brady retires. Tampa Bay probably still thinks they have a good defense and a good offensive line. Maybe they're a team that says, hey, Daniel Jones got experience, and I can't imagine Aaron Rodgers retiring on this note, but maybe it gets so miserable. He's lost 5 in a row now, which I'm not sure he's ever done in his career before. Maybe his rookie year, or no, not his rookie year. His first year he was a starting quarterback. It was maybe the last time he lost 5 in a row. But if things get so bad there that I could see him more saying, "Let's go somewhere else." Um, but Green Bay could end up needing a quarterback too at the end of this.
Yeah, I mean, so many factors to consider, and then you mentioned teams where they could draft. Obviously, the Colts are right now at 14, Washington at 16, and just real quick, we'll give people a rundown. Like Houston's at 1 right now; they could draft a quarterback. Carolina at 2, they could. Vegas at 3, who knows? Pittsburgh at 4, no, they're not drafting a quarterback. Detroit at 5, they certainly could, right? And Jacksonville at
Yes.
6, probably not. Um, and Arizona at 7, no. The Bears at 8 will not. Maybe the Packers at 9, they could, and then of course the Eagles have the Saints pick, and they're at 10. They're not drafting a quarterback. So that's the teams like you said, the Indianapolis, Washington scenarios right now. They're in the middle of the first round. They could do that. They could go and try to get Daniel Jones just because they're not in a great position to draft a quarterback. So it'll be fascinating to see. Obviously, a lot of season left.
Yeah, and Daniel Jones is going to be fine no matter what. He's going to be a starting quarterback in the league next year. And if I had to bet my money on it, it will be with the Giants, because the Giants have played themselves into a position where it doesn't it doesn't work for them to draft it. They're going to be drafting too late to get one of those stud quarterbacks. If we remember early in the season, we kept talking about Joe Shane's going to see this guy and this guy and this guy. I mean, he might still be seeing him, but he's not going to see him on draft day unless he has some way of, pulling a Howie Roseman when he went up to number 2 to get Carson Wentz. He would have to do something like that to in order to get one of those stud quarterbacks, and not easy to do. So to me, the most likely scenario is that Daniel Jones is back with the Giants next season.
I agree. I agree. And a lot of season left. We'll see, but I think that's where things are trending, and we'll leave it on that note. And so everyone be sure to read our coverage, NJ.com/Giants.
We made our picks, I guess, already, right? Yeah, we
Oh,
already
yeah,
picked.
we did. I
Yeah,
didn't
we
put
did.
a score to it. I guess,
Now we made them.
yeah, good enough. I mean, it doesn't really, I think the Giants win this game they're going to win by a touchdown because they win every game by a touchdown. Whatever you want to put it, 27 or 27-20, 24-17, whatever.
I
Uh,
had them 20-17.
there you
So
go. So be sure to read, we'll have our picks later in the week, our formal picks, NJ.com/Giants, all your NJ Advanced Media Giants coverage. And also be sure to like, review, subscribe to us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. And we will be with you guys back here next week talking about whatever happens Sunday between the Texans and the Giants.